Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Meeker. I'm Deputy Director of the POPVOX Foundation, former caseworker, former Director of Constituent Services, and I am flying solo today. So you guys are stuck with me as your speaker and your moderator. And hopefully we'll be able to kind of open it up so we can have a little bit more of a conversation. Because today we are talking about how to bring interns and fellows into your casework in a way that makes it a great experience for your interns and a great use of your time as well as caseworkers. So I will admit, when I was doing casework and my district director came up to me and said, guess what? In addition to managing the casework team and handling your own not insignificant casework portfolio, you're also going to take on doing the intern onboarding and training. I wasn't thrilled, but it really did kind of become one of the parts of my job that I really liked best. It surprised me, but it really kind of became a really rewarding part that was inextricable from casework for a few reasons. First of all, training the interns every cycle and how our casework process worked was such a good opportunity for me to kind of step back and say, okay, as casework manager, how is this working? Where are the interns making mistakes? Where are those kind of pointing us toward places where we can be doing this a little bit better? And then also, we've all been here, you get really invested in the interns in a different way than you get invested in those constituents that you're working cases for. I know many of us have been here, but I'm still in touch with a lot of the interns that I worked with. It's so wonderful to see where they've gone on to, just a really kind of proud professional moment whenever I see them get a promotion or see them end up in a government job on LinkedIn. And that's something that's always super rewarding. And then last but not least, your mileage may vary here. I recognize that this is very personal, but when we're talking about casework, we talk a lot about burnout. We talk a lot about compassion fatigue, about how to kind of stay alive and to the beauty of this work and to the promise for what we can do for constituents. And for me, bringing a new class of interns in 3 times a year and kind of making the case for casework to them was a chance for me to kind of remember why I was doing this work. So to see the interns really fall in love with, oh my gosh, this is what people go through and this is the impact that we can have, was really kind of the chance for me to remember, oh yeah, this is the impact that we can have. And watching the interns get invested in those outcomes for constituents was really always just a great way for me to kind of refresh, why was I doing this? So I think the internships can be a really fabulous part of casework. I hope that you feel the same way. But today we're going to kind of talk through some big picture best practices for bringing interns in, and then get into some ideas for specific projects to keep your interns busy. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. So as I said, today is going to be a little bit different because I am flying solo. So we're going to try something a little bit different. Stay with me here. For me, like I said, I'm going to talk through the big picture for how to think strategically about bringing in interns. But I think for me, the key was just always, how do I have enough projects to give to these interns? And that's just a matter of just straight creativity. Do we have enough ideas that I can act on, that I can give to these interns? So if you are up for it and you have a really cool idea that's worked for it for your team, when we get to Q&A, I'm going to give folks the option to become panelists. So you can turn on your video, turn on your microphone. If you're up for it, we can have a little bit of a discussion about what's worked for you, challenges that you've faced. And if you have this webinar on in a different tab, totally understand. We can wrap up a little bit early. So let's dive into those big picture principles. I'm a broken record here, but for me, I think the key to making an internship a really good opportunity and to really think about integrating it into casework in a way that's sustainable is to plan ahead. This is going to vary a little bit depending on your role in your team. For, are you involved in intern hiring? Can you choose people that you feel are going to be good fits for casework? Are you involved in the training? Are you the one making sure that they understand your processes, or is that somebody else? Are you involved in management? Are you the one making sure that they are following your processes, that they are supported? That's going to look a little bit different depending on how much of each of those 3 buckets you actually have. But again, I think the key is just making sure that you've given it some thought before someday in June, when you have 6 interns suddenly land on your doorstep with nothing to give to them. For me, that was always the part where, when that happened, when I hadn't planned ahead, when our team hadn't planned ahead, I felt like I couldn't give those interns the experience that they should have, that they needed, just because I hadn't put in the time to get ready. So definitely, I think here is just planning ahead. So first thing that really worked for us, like casework, scaling casework where it's possible, writing your form letters, writing your constituent materials in advance. The same thing really helps for making sure that whatever part of intern support that you're doing is sustainable. So for example, what worked really well for our team was, we kind of realized at some point, this is when we reassigned who was working on supporting those interns, that we'd had different people in the office responsible for doing our intern onboarding, which meant that the intern classes were a little bit inconsistent, and it was just taking us a ton of time. If we hadn't invested in that training, that meant we had to invest more in kind of managing and coaching and supervising the interns. So what we did was we kind of sat down as a team. We had folks from casework team, folks from our outreach team, folks from admin staff, and said, all right, we're going to write the casework manual. And this thing probably took us a whole day to write, just thinking about the hours that we put into it. But it had everything we thought the interns would need. It had our standard operating procedures on the phones. It had info on the congressman in the district that we thought they'd need to know. It had some basic talking points on our issues. It had where to find good lunch spots within walking distance of the office. It had, thinking about your intern career path. So this thing was really comprehensive. Everything that we thought was going to be vital for the interns to know, to do a good job and have a good time in our office. So it was a huge amount of work that went into it. But then from that day on, when the interns showed up in our office, first thing we did was hand them a paper copy of the manual and say, okay, go sit in the conference room. Don't come back. Don't talk to me until you've read this cover to cover. And then we had a quiz for them afterwards. And then they jump into asking questions, doing some practice one-on-one activities with us. So kind of the investment to be able to give them that manual probably saved us at least 4 hours of staff time just in like the imparting information part of our training for every intern class. So within 2 intern classes, it had totally paid off in terms of the time that we put into it. And I think that's really important. That doesn't have to be a manual. Maybe that's a video, maybe you record yourself doing an intern training. That can also be really helpful for making sure that your DC interns get a little bit of training on what is casework so that they're kind of alive to it on the phones. But just being creative with it. How can you scale that time that you're putting in? And I will also just flag for casework managers, if there's someone in your team where you kind of have your eye on them, like maybe they could take on managing the casework team when I go on to bigger and better things. This is such a good task for them. It gets people thinking about process, it gets people thinking about scale, efficiency, managing people. Such a good task to dole out. It's also a fun task to give to your interns. Hey, write the manual for the class behind you. You'll be surprised by what they come up with. Okay, next big principle. I think most of you have this really well integrated into your work already, but I just wanted to call it out. So I think it's top of mind for many of us. It certainly is on our team after an intern was a victim of the recent attack on Rep. Connolly's district office, making sure that your interns understand your office's safety procedures. Look, if you're training 3 intern classes a year, it's really easy to let the safety stuff fall through the cracks, and it absolutely can't. Making sure that safety procedures, that's your emergency exit plans. Where do you leave the office? Where do you gather? Who do you call? Making sure that interns understand your equipment. Where's the panic button? How do I use the mail hood? That has to be part of your intern training. And for me, another important part of that is making sure that your interns understand clear boundaries for what they're expected to handle on the phones. What kind of behavior empowers an intern to hang up the phone? When are interns empowered to put a constituent on hold and go get a staff member? And that's not just including things like verbal abuse, like foul language. That's also things like is a constituent threatening self-harm. So just making sure that clear boundaries are a really important part of your training is going to be key to making sure that these interns have a great experience with your office. And lastly, this is in our safety manual, but I just always like to call it out because I love to see offices do this, is consider posting those rules publicly. Is it going to stop a constituent from flying off the handle? No. Is it a signal for your interns? Just a reminder to them, our office has your back. We're going to enforce the rules. We're going to make sure that you're supported and that you don't have to handle behavior that's unacceptable. Absolutely. So I really encourage offices to think about posting those rules publicly. All right. This is one that I feel like took my team a long time to wrap our heads around, took me a long time for me to wrap my head around it. But once we did, it really changed the way we thought about how to assign intern tasks. And that's assigning interns to build capacity instead of building relationships. If you've been through redistricting recently, or you're a new office, you've had some staff turnover, you know how difficult it can be to rebuild relationships when someone leaves. There's a trust factor, there's a shared history factor that's difficult, if not impossible, to totally recreate with a new person. There's just really no graceful way to kind of recover a relationship with a constituent, with a long-term case, with a local elected leader, with someone in a support agency, with a stakeholder in your community. There's no real graceful way to kind of recover and transition that relationship if an intern had it from the beginning and then the intern leaves. Some people are offended to find out that they were working with an intern. Emails get sent to the wrong inbox that no one's monitoring anymore. There's just a lot of ways to drop that ball there. So it's great to be able to avoid that issue in the first place. On the other side is capacity building. So instead of building relationships, that's building things that frees up your office's ability to do other things. Your capacity is your time, your capacity is your headspace, it's your kind of intellectual bandwidth, your capacity to dive into big issues. It's your knowledge, it's how much you know about what you're working on. So for me, giving interns kind of projects that focused on building our capacity were ways we really could make use of those extra pairs of hands to move our whole casework team's operation forward. And that was always really exciting. So that's thinking about how do you get your casework team or how do you get your intern team to create resources that you can use in the future. Maybe that's drafting form letters, maybe that's drafting constituent info sheets, one-pagers. Maybe that's having them do a little bit of experimentation. We've had this idea for an office hours model. Will it work? Can we get the interns to try it for us and just see how much time and how much hassle it's going to be? Those are all great ways to kind of get those interns thinking about and working on ways to improve your casework long-term. Okay, and then two other kind of big picture principles that really helped me in figuring out how to kind of structure the interns' experience in our office. We've all been there when we are either thinking about a task for an intern, or one of our colleagues comes up, asks, hey, can I give this to an intern? And for me, it was always a little bit of a fine line to say what's appropriate for an intern and what's not. What ended up really helping was thinking through legally, morally, ethically, the way that Congress is able to take on unpaid or minimally paid intern labor is because Congress sees internships as a service to the intern. You are providing an educational experience, even if you're paying the intern. And that's the purpose of them being there. So being able to really clearly articulate to myself, all right, I'm thinking about giving this task to an intern. What will they learn? Can I distill what they're going to learn into a couple of words that I could write down, that the intern can write down? That's what made it an appropriate intern task for me. And that's not just giving projects, that's also thinking, I don't have anything for this intern to do. Can I have them shadow a member of my team? Can I have them take notes in a meeting? Again, being able to just articulate to myself, what is that skill that this intern is coming away with, was really helpful. That gets a little bit harder at scale. If you have a massive intern class, you can consider kind of making that educational focus really explicit and having the interns take a little bit of responsibility for mentoring and teaching each other. It's not ideal, but if you're really struggling to just, how do I manage this class of 10 plus interns, you might think about something like team captains and saying, hey, team, I want you all to work on this project. Stephanie, John, whatever, you're going to be the kind of team captain here. The skill you're learning is leadership. The skill everyone else is learning is, investigating participant or pharmacy benefit managers, and going from there. All right. Last but not least, what was super helpful for me, super helpful for our intern team, was kind of flipping the schedule of the internship and starting with what they're going to get out of it. So first of all, on individual projects was really helpful for me to always start by figuring out for the intern, whatever you're doing for me, this is the format that I want it to come back in. Maybe that's a briefing, maybe that's a memo. Can I give you an example so that I don't have to worry about doing as much editing and doing as much fixing on my end if there's a template to work from? But then more generally in the context of the internship, helping the intern think about what is this going to look like on my resume? What is this going to look like in my portfolio? How is this going to show up in my job applications? It was really helpful for me to be super explicit about this. So saying to the interns early, hey, think about what you need, and then talk to us about how we can help you get there. Do you need a writing sample? Do you need social media for a comms portfolio? Do you need a piece of coding? We'll get into some projects that might involve that in a little bit. Do you need a piece of code that you can show off? Is it a line on a resume? Do you want to be able to say, I briefed senior staff on XYZ issue? So really thinking explicitly kind of brought the interns into a position of responsibility to say, this is what I want out of this internship, and I'm gonna take the lead on making sure that that happens for me. And the last thing, and this was always a little bit controversial in my office, so I'm curious what y'all think. I loved to start my intern training by talking about our reference process. So saying, hey, you are here for a reason. When you finish this internship, you're going to go to grad school. You're going to be looking for those first jobs. And we expect that we will play a role in that for you. You get to decide what our role is. How is our letter of recommendation going to look for you? How great of a reference am I going to be? I want you to be thinking about that. This was also great for traffic control. I know many offices have been through this. You kind of get a few weeks out from those fall application deadlines for law school and grad school and your MPAs and your MPPs and whatever. And all of a sudden you have so many interns who really need those letters of recommendation from the member and they really need it tomorrow. So flagging for folks that process, really great for getting ahead of that traffic jam. So I hope that's helpful. All right, that is the end of my big picture principle. So let's talk about specific project ideas, because like I said, there's no such thing as too many good ideas for what to do with your interns, idle hands, all that jazz. You really just want your interns to stay busy, to keep them out of trouble, keep them happy and satisfied in learning, and also to move the ball for your office. So this is very, very sketchy and Breakfast Club stereotypy, but for me, it was always helpful to think about the interns in specific buckets. So for this bucket, this was kind of my campaign kids. They understand how Congress works, but they haven't really figured out, am I a comms person? Am I a policy person? And am I a future caseworker? Am I going to run for office one day? So this is kind of my entry bucket. It was, I'm not sure what to do with you. So here's some tasks that might work. So first of all, we hear all the time from casework teams that they really want to do more casework specific outreach and they don't have bandwidth. There are some super low budget, low lift ways to get your team's name out there if that's what you're looking to do. And a great one is sending interns out into the district to flyer for you. You need a flyer from your comms team. You need a strategy for where you're going to send those interns. And depending on your district, depending on your state, you might need an intern with reliable transportation. You might need a way to get an intern to a place where they can walk around and put flyers up. But this is such a good, just low lift way to get your team's casework operation just visible in your community. So it's lovely, especially for interns, where you kind of want to build their confidence in talking to people, or maybe, frankly, you just want them out of the office for a few hours, which is okay. We've all been there. But it's great to kind of give the interns a little bit of a script too. So you're going to walk into a business, you're going to ask if they have a bulletin board. Can you please put your casework flyer up? Some basic talking points. I'm here from XYZ member, senator. Here's what they're about. This is the nonpartisan office. We're not the campaign. This is what casework is. And that's what's also great is to give them kind of one little opportunity for something to come back. So thank you so much for letting me put your flyer up. What would you like me to pass on to the congressman for you? What would you like the senator to know or to be able to do to support you in your business? Such a good low touch way to get the interns out there. This is one I think most people have probably put their interns on, but it's such a great use of interns to really do that capacity building. I think most people probably have some contact lists for casework, for outreach. It is so tough to stay on top of those, which leads to some really awkward situations where, well, we were hosting a veterans breakfast and we sent it to our list of veteran service officers, but we didn't realize that 3 of them were different people and now they're upset because they weren't invited to this veterans breakfast. It's great to be able to use your interns to keep those big contact lists up to date. So you need to know which list you're going to update and then give the interns clear criteria for how far to go. For example, if you want them to call offices to make sure that they're getting contact information, or are they just scraping it from what's available on the website? So you just need interns with some decent organization, some decent attention to detail. Again, a great kind of entry level, let me see what you can do project for interns. This is one of my favorites, getting the interns to recruit your other interns. So I will say sometimes this works better for spring and fall classes, depending on what you have going on. There is no better representative for what your office offers in terms of internships than their interns themselves. And interns can kind of really make that case to their peers for why is working with your team a great opportunity. So this is going to vary for your office. Are you looking to recruit more interns? Are you looking to recruit interns from different backgrounds, different parts of your state or district? Depends on your goals, but it can be such a good way to send interns that are maybe a little bit more confident, maybe able to work a little bit more independently, more self-directedly out on a really cool project. So maybe that's talking to high school civics classes. Hey, here's my role as an intern for Senator whoever. Here's why you should think about applying. Let me explain the application process to you. Here's a day in my life. Here's what I've learned since being with the office. Maybe that's talking to college poli-sci classes, poli-sci 101. For the summer, it can be a little harder, but maybe it's going and talking to summer camps. Maybe it's talking to day campers about, hey, when you get back to school in the fall, here's what you might think about doing on your afternoons. So some really fun stuff there. Okay, this is a really fun bucket, and let me just make a quick pitch to you for why you should consider hiring interns specifically for data skills. So we always really try to make a point of bringing in interns who were in computer science degrees, or maybe poli-sci degrees where they were doing some statistics work. There's some really cool stuff that your interns can do for you with these specific skills. First thing. Let me caveat, I understand that this does not work for every CRM. IQ and Fireside, you can open up old cases and edit them. I understand that for Indigov, you can't. So Indigov folks, I am so sorry. Bear with me for a second and bug your folks to ask for this to be a feature that you can use. But this is cleaning and categorizing your old cases to make sure that your data works. So for our team, we totally overhauled how we tracked casework data a few years into my being there. And it was wonderful. We were getting super detailed data going forward. It was really easy for us to pull specific cases so we could kind of do some real-time analysis that worked for our policy team. Awesome. Problem was all of the old cases weren't on that scheme. So we worked with our intern team to say, hey, this is how we're doing data going forward. So please go back over this set of historical Social Security cases and please add, whatever the tags were or whatever the UDF fields were. We want to know, is it SSI or SSDI? We want to know, was it medical? Was it financial? What's the difference there? So great project for interns to kind of get a feel for casework, and then such a good project to make sure that your team is kind of building that core of data to make it easier in the future. You do want to make sure that you have a way to do some quality control here. So that's helping interns track which cases are they editing so that you can go back and make sure they're accurate. But once you have that figured out, this is such a good use of intern time. And then analyzing that casework data. If your team has put that work into doing some great data tracking, if you are comfortable letting an intern just kind of play around in your casework data, maybe you download a data set that they can do that with, maybe you work with your CRM to kind of pull one big report of all the cases that you've worked. It can be kind of fun to let an intern with some more advanced data, some more advanced data analysis skills, just kind of see what comes up. These might be specific questions that you're asking, like, hey, are we seeing any kind of seasonal pattern with our IRS casework? Or it might be more broad. Hey, tell me if you notice any trends on our VA casework since we've been in office. I always like to kind of leave it a little open-ended because I feel like I come into the casework with my bias, but I'd loved to see what the interns could just do, given a free hand and given their junior and college data analysis skills. All right. Then, as always, we have the interns who are interested in comms. These are our rising digital directors, our rising social media gurus. They are super helpful for the places where casework kind of touches comms. So first of all, if your team does a survey for your constituents, I don't know about y'all, but we sent out our survey by email, which was wonderful. We had a decent-ish 10% response rate, if I'm remembering correctly. But there was always a subset of people that we knew we were never going to get to respond to us on that survey, just because they weren't super comfortable with digital literacy. They just weren't super comfortable opening up that email, understanding what was going to be asked of them. So there was always a set of constituents that we had interns call and then do that survey over the phone. You might have specific lists of people that you want to follow up with. Is that people who haven't answered your survey? Do you want to call successful cases and see if they're interested in sharing a testimonial for your social media? Whatever it is, you're going to want to make sure the interns have some very clear instructions. Maybe you have a script for them. Maybe you kind of have some, if the constituent asks why, then please send them to X, if then instructions for them. But this can be such a good way to get interns kind of having some deep conversations with constituents, but not in the context of building those relationships, not in the context of starting to do casework. So these can be really fun. Obviously, you want your social media team, you want your comms team to kind of have some buy-in on how are they doing this. And you really want to make sure that you have some visibility into the lists that you're pulling. I will say, don't be like me. We had our interns doing these phone follow-up surveys, and I accidentally pulled a list that included a constituent who was deceased. Didn't catch it in time because the constituent's name was very similar to his son's. Accidentally had the intern call that office and ask for the man who was deceased. So let that be a note of caution to double check your lists. But this is such a good use of intern time. Okay, and then office hours. So like I said, we hear all the time from offices, we really want to kind of do some more cool outreach. We really want to partner with our outreach team more. We want to get out there, tell people about our services, make sure that we're reaching everyone in our community. Maybe especially for teams that have just recently been through redistricting. You might be places in your district, in your state, where just, you're getting fewer cases. People just know less about your team and the services that you're offering. So some of these kind of low lift office hours can be such a cool thing to get interns involved with. And like we said at the beginning, this can also be kind of a trial run. If you have an idea for an office hours, have the intern take the reins on like the lift of just setting it up, see how bad it is, have them track how many hours it takes them to, call senior centers and see who's interested in hosting. How much time does it take them to kind of assemble the box of everything that you're going to need to bring once you get there? How many interactions do they have? For these, again, in the interests of quality control and supervision, I would say probably not sending interns to do one of these by themselves. What we did on our team that worked pretty well was making sure our caseworkers were ready to work remotely. So then we could have the interns, an intern, two interns standing at that desk, and then have me or whichever member of my casework team a couple feet away doing our casework, making sure it's a good use of our time, ready to step in if there was an intake, ready to step in if we heard anything going weird. But that let the interns kind of have the experience of doing the outreach, talking to constituents, delivering talking points, signing people up for the newsletter. Well, I could still be there doing casework. So it was a cool way to double team the time. Again, it's not going to work for every office, not going to work for every intern crew, but I really encourage you to think about how can you use your interns to experiment and see what works for your office. Okay. We always get the interns who secretly, not secretly, kind of wanted to be in DC. They're really interested in policy. They really want to debate policy with you. Tons of things that you can do to make use of that in casework. Obviously, casework-specific research can be a really great thing. I love falling down these rabbit holes. I know these rabbit holes take me away from the things I'm supposed to be doing. So sometimes giving them to an intern so that they can have the fun and then brief me the top 10 things I need to know is a good use of time. So this might be an area of casework where you're like, what is going on here? Someone tell me what's happening with DFAS, please, for the love of God. So giving interns kind of an area to research and then getting them started on where can I find out what's happening here? Are there CRS reports? Are there GAO reports? Does it show up on GAO's big list of undone recommendations? Is there any news been reported in places like NextGov or GovExec that they might be able to learn about? Is there anything that committees have done on this thing that's showing up in our casework? that would be helpful for us to know. Like we said, this is an area I find where the quality can vary a lot, and the format that interns will just tend to give these back to you in will vary. So making sure that you have some templates. Hey, I want this memo. I want it to be less than 1,000 words, please. I want it to be bullet points. I want you to give it to me face to face instead of in a written format. Super, super helpful. And then drafting constituent facing material. So again, thinking about scale, thinking about capacity. I think we all have some of those areas of casework where we're getting the casework because there's a misunderstanding out there. People are waiting too long to apply for something. People don't understand the difference between two different types of benefits. That's something where it's great to be able to write something that goes out to your community that says, hey, FYI, you may not have known this. We hope this info is helpful. It can be tough to free up the bandwidth to work on those, which is where, again, the interns can really, really come in handy. This may not just be reactive to something that you have right now, something that's going on right now. It's also great to look down the road and say, okay, as we're thinking about disaster planning, or as we're thinking about planning for a shutdown, how can I get the interns involved in creating reference materials, creating form letters, drafting form letters, creating draft one-pagers, draft social media posts that we will be able to edit, touch up, send out if and when we need them. It can also be really good use of time. All right. And then this is always so rewarding. We have those interns who are absolute rock stars. We trust them on the phones with constituents. We can see them being on our team. We're like, when do you graduate? Because you let me know. We've got a space for you. But really starting to get interns into your specific casework portfolios in ways that are still appropriate. Really want to emphasize this. Again, so when I was an intern, folks just handed me casework, which I loved, really had a great time. That's why I became a caseworker. I don't think it makes sense for a lot of cases. It may for some, may totally make sense. If you have a ton of passport cases, you know that they're going to wrap quickly. I think that's an example of a type of case that makes sense to give to interns. Not every case will. So just kind of have your judgment, have some procedures for, okay, these kinds of cases, maybe if I have a good intern, these kinds of cases, these stay with permanent staff. But something that interns can always do to be helpful on your cases are just monitoring your casework status portfolios. These might be keeping track of average wait times and updating that info in your form letters. This might be actually looking at specific cases if you're working with an agency that has a online system, so you can log in and see the status of specific cases. Again, this is going to be a little bit case by case. You're going to want to figure it out with those caseworkers, with those specific interns, depending on the case. Just what do you want that intern to flag in the case? When do you want that intern to say, hey, I think I'm seeing some movement here? What notes should they add? Can they add notes in your CRM? Are you comfortable with them drafting form letters? Are you comfortable with them drafting update letters? So it's going to be kind of up to you. But again, these kind of standard monitoring, there's no real action, but we want to keep an eye on it. Tasks and cases can be a really good use of time. And then also developing intakes. So again, this is one where I'd kind of be careful and wait till I had an intern I was really confident with. But it can also just be a good opportunity for general interns just to sit in with you and see how casework works. So that's developing intakes. So maybe having an intern join you when you do a sit down with the constituent, having an intern listen in when you're doing that big, tell me your story, what can I do to help initial phone call. Maybe that's a really formal role for the intern, like, hey, I want you to be taking notes, or maybe that's kind of after the fact work. Hey, I know you sat in on this call. I'd like you to draft the initial inquiry letter. Really depends on what's going to work for your team. I'd also say, depending on your team, you may be more comfortable asking the constituent if they have permission to let an intern sit in, especially for sensitive cases. Well, let me say, I wouldn't do this for just any case. I'd want to do this for cases where I felt like I had a sense for how the intake was going to go. Maybe they've already called, I'm returning their call. I have a little bit of a summary for what they're going to talk to me about. So I know that I'm not going to put the intern into a situation where it might be too much for them. I'm not going to freak out a constituent who might be a little bit sensitive if there's suddenly another person that they weren't expecting. again, kind of coming back to that relationship and trust building, you have the best sense for what's going to work best for your constituents. You will also have the best sense for what's going to work best for your interns. So just trust your judgment. But I think this is such a cool way to really bring interns in on casework. This is what it looks like. This is how a constituent articulates their problem. What can we pick up here from how a constituent talks about their experience with government? What words are you noticing? What emotions are you noticing? This is such a good teaching experience for, let's talk about the impact government has. That can be really fun. And then just kind of wrap up on the general project ideas and just thinking about the internships. Like I said, I really loved flipping the timeline for internships and thinking about, beyond the resume, beyond the reference, what do I want the intern to take away? And I think for me, the most valuable thing that we could send the interns away with was the chance to say, that's better because I was here, something really concrete. I did my internship with the whatever office, and they asked me to find a better way to handle incoming paper documents, and I did, and that office is still using that process. They asked me to write a letter for constituents or write a one-pager for constituents that was going to help people understand the difference between SSI and SSDI benefits. I did that. That's helping people understand. Giving the interns something tactile, something tangible, something real, kind of sets them up to leave your team with a sense for how they can be effective in government, even in really, really small ways. And I think that's really powerful, kind of setting the interns up to be ambassadors, not only for your team, but for Congress, no matter where they land, is something that's really special and part of the kind of the power and the glory of what we do and why we take on interns. So on a very, very highfalutin note, that is everything that I wanted to go over. So as always, if you have questions, if there are other topics you'd like us to get ready on, please, the doors are always open. We love suggestions, love hearing from folks. Casework@popvox.org is the best way to reach us, or you can reach out to me directly at anne@popvox.org, ANNE@POPVOX.org. It is lovely to see everybody, and thank you so much again for joining us, and good luck with your incoming intern classes. And have a good rest of your day.